Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me on the screen, as always, is my co-host, Joe Clark. And the NFL season is officially over. The Seattle Seahawks defeated the New England Patriots. The Steelers got to stay in the record books in a couple of areas, being tied for the most Super Bowls of all time with the Patriots. The Patriots did not pass them, thank the Lord. And Ben Roethlisberger remaining the youngest quarterback ever to have won a Super Bowl. Drake May had an opportunity about 100 some odd days younger than Ben, but he hung on to that. Joe, being in the New England area, what's the attitude like up there? Were people expecting to win that game?
They're always expecting to win. It's such an entitled fan base. They always think they're going to win. But no, I mean, I think a lot of people recognize the challenges that Seattle's defense presented, especially given how much the Patriots offense had kind of struggled throughout the postseason. But they were still expecting to win. They still had faith that Drake May would somehow get it done, and they're going to start a new dynasty. And that's just how they think. But it didn't happen. I'm certainly not upset about it.
Yeah, I lived in Seattle. I think I've told this story on here before, but I lived in Seattle. Like, I moved there 4 or 5 days before the Steelers played the Seahawks in the Super Bowl, and got to kind of gloat over over them losing. It's a little different because obviously the Steelers didn't defeat them in your case there, but it is kind of sweet to be the antagonist in those situations. I've been in those shoes before. The topics we're going to talk about today, Steelers related stuff. Of course, there is the drama, the former player drama. I guess some current players, really just one, and that one being kind of an interesting, juicy piece of this drama potentially. So we're going to touch on that, and then we're going to talk about the Steelers quarterback options for the 2026 season. Of course, Aaron Rodgers seems like he's going to return. We'll talk about that. But if he doesn't, there's a lot of different options. Maybe not great options, but there are options out there. And so we're going to try and sift through those and decipher what we like best. And then I dropped my first mock draft of the offseason. We're going to go through some of the highlights of what I did. We're not going to go pick for pick, but some of the more interesting things. I had a little bit of fun with the first version, as I usually try to. So we're going to go over that. And then we'll answer a question at the end of the show. If you want to have your question answered on a future episode, the number's at the bottom of the screen there, 412-254-3145. Call or text. You can text your question. Just let us know your name, where you're from, and a brief question, and we'll answer it on a future episode. To the drama, Joe, it's all anyone wants to talk about right now, and that's kind of peak off season, if you will. There's nothing else going on. The coaching staff's already been hired. The combine's still a couple weeks away. Free agency's still about a month away. And so what better to talk about than some former player drama? I think you wrote the original article on it, so why don't you give just an overview of what was said?
Yeah, so we talked about on the show a few months ago, Joey Porter Sr. in his first appearance on Cam Hayward's Not Just Football podcast went on a pretty prolonged rant about former players kind of criticizing the team, criticizing Mike Tomlin and how, when they were played, they kept that in-house. He went on a much more direct rant during his appearance. I guess it was recorded last week on Radio Row at the Super Bowl and it was posted yesterday. Specifically really going after Ben Roethlisberger and James Harrison, but his comments on Roethlisberger really caught a few eyebrows. He said basically that the stuff that Ben did in the locker room that they don't talk about, like there's a lot that went on that hasn't been brought up. Um, and then that basically he was a bad teammate, that nobody would have voted for him when he was captain because didn't have any captain qualities, that they made it so he was just the captain. They didn't vote on it because he knew nobody would vote for him. He basically told the story that whenever players had family members that wanted to, have items signed, Roethlisberger just refused to sign, and Porter didn't like that. He's like, "We're not fans, we're teammates." But yeah, the big quote was basically that, he said Ben's a bad teammate, and he said basically he said, but he's a good person. He goes, no. So basically, Joey Porter doesn't think Ben Roethlisberger is a good person, doesn't think he's a good teammate. Um, And then Cam Hayward's podcast, Not Just Football, posted that clip on social media, on Instagram and on Twitter. And on Instagram, there's a lot of former Steelers who commented, seeming to agree with the sentiment that Porter had. And Mason Rudolph also commented. And given the history between Ben Roethlisberger and Mason Rudolph, that one certainly caught a few eyeballs.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the comments on the Instagram post here in a second, but I did just want to touch on the idea of Ben Roethlisberger not being a good teammate and I guess in the eyes of Joey Porter Sr., not a good person. I would say it's not really a secret that Ben Roethlisberger was, let's just say, troubled in his early career, and Joey Porter Sr. was only with Roethlisberger for what, 2004, 2005, and 2006. So 3 seasons they spent together as actual teammates. Of course, Joey Porter Sr. did come back as a position coach. So he's been around the team since leaving as a player. So it's not totally unfair to just, it's not totally fair to just discount it as, oh, Roethlisberger was kind of maybe a bad person in those first 3 years of his career. And I think it's pretty well known that he's turned his life around in a lot of ways. He's now a father. He has a podcast that's very faith-based. And, he's definitely tried to do some image rehabilitation. And I think he's done it successfully, honestly. But, Joey Porter has his opinion, and it appears to have struck a chord with former teammates, as you mentioned, the Instagram stuff. Let me pull up some of those comments here. It's kind of hard to decipher which comments were about which topic because the Instagram clip was talking about Mike Tomlin kind of being, I guess, unfairly criticized, and it was also talking about James Harrison, I think, and it was talking about Ben Roethlisberger. So there was a lot going on in the clip, but of course the big newsworthy part of the clip is the Ben Roethlisberger thing, and so when players are responding to the clip, it's kind of reasonable-ish to assume that, they're talking about the Roethlisberger part. And so some of the comments on there have since been walked back by some of the people. Like Zach Banner said, what did he say? I can't wait to say something about this. And Banner has his own podcast. So, that led people to think, oh, is he going to do something, to pile on to Ben Roethlisberger? Banner then took to social media later that night and basically said, no, I love Ben Roethlisberger, one of the best teammates I've had, kind of thing. So there are some of these players that are saying, whoa, this wasn't meant to be a thing at Ben. This was meant to be, the Ben or the Tomlin critique. They didn't really specify, to be honest, what they were talking about. But the most notable, as you said, Mason Rudolph said, go off with an arrow through a target, basically saying your comment was on point or on target. You hit the mark with what you were saying to Joey Porter Sr. He did tag Porter. And so, like you said, the history there is evident. I mean, you don't have to go back. It's not too hard to find that their relationship wasn't that great. I dug up this quote from another podcast appearance that Mason Rudolph was on. He said, I wouldn't say we were close, but he did his job. He had a job to do. He had a team to lead, and I get that. There are plenty of times where he would answer questions that I had. So, he didn't totally throw him under the bus in that podcast appearance back then, but it was pretty open at the time that Roethlisberger was unhappy with Rudolph being selected in the first place. He thought that was kind of a waste of a draft pick, and they should have kept building the team around him. Why draft a quarterback that isn't going to play, and yada yada. So yeah, that was the juiciest part. And then some former teammates, were more overt in what they were saying. Mike Adams said, "Amen. Hold them boys accountable. Ben talking shit about anybody is comical." So some of the people were directly addressing the Ben Roethlisberger part of the criticism. So interesting mix of things. Joe, what do you make? I mean, what do you make of this overall? Like, this is obviously not the best look? Or is it just, I mean, I don't know. I'll let you just take the floor.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing's just kind of dumb. And like the way, even if you watch the Hayward's podcast, the way it was trending is it was like Porter just kind of re-brought up his old rant about former players saying stuff. There's really no need for, this level of vitriol to come out, especially because, I mean, Ben Roethlisberger hasn't said much all that negative about Mike Tomlin. I mean, he said during the season, maybe it was time to part ways, and that's really about as strong as he said one way or the other. He had glowing things to say about Tomlin. When he made a video after the news after he stepped down, so Ben hasn't been, super negative talking about Tom, and he hasn't been super negative talking about the current team. I mean, his podcast is like extremely tepid and mild with takes. He hasn't said anything, you know, really worth noting in a long time on that podcast. So, um, I mean, it was really like the Tom Brady stuff from years ago was like the most like noteworthy thing he said on that podcast. So, I mean, Porter just kind of seemed to have an axe to grind and decided to choose violence on Radio Row. And, now this is a story, and you have all these ex-Steelers coming out of the woodwork to, state their opinion, which is fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but it's just stupid, messy drama. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's weird that like it happened on Cam Hayward's podcast too. Um, I mean, but obviously he's got to get ratings. He's got to boost eyes on that. He's clearly wants a media career after he's done playing football, which who knows when that could be. Could be, as soon as a few weeks, could be 2 years. I don't know. But he wants to have a media career, and obviously that gets a ton of attention. It's gotten national news. It's been the talk of the day on a bunch of these ESPN, whatever morning shows. Um, but it's just like that's not really where you expect this weighty all-out war between former Steelers to originate from. I mean, the whole thing I just think is just it's like I don't even necessarily know if it's a bad look for the organization as a whole. Like, it's a bad look for like certain guys, I guess, but like there's no need for all these like retired players to then like now be fighting with each other. Like, I'm glad Zach Banner clarified his statement. Obviously, like you don't want to get lumped into something that you're not a part of. But like, why is Mike Adams coming out and like trashing on Ben? Like, why now? Like, you played, what did he play? He played 41 games, and he was like not very effective with the Steelers. Like, I know he's been doing the media rounds. Maybe he wants somebody to pick him up on their podcast and talk about it. But like, there's no need for some of these guys to come out and say stuff now. Um, because they're doing the exact stuff that Debo's railing, or not Debo, I'm sorry, that Joey Porter's railing against, because he's Mr. We kept things in house. We didn't talk about what was going on. And now all these guys are like, oh, well, now he opened the door. So now we're going to hit that like things are going on. So, I mean,
Right.
I think Porter's being very um, hypocritical
Yeah.
for blaming players talking on a podcast while talking on a podcast while also like telling it like one behind closed door story and being like, well, there's also more that I'm not going to talk about, which you're just doing what you're telling these guys they shouldn't be doing. So I just think it's dumb.
Yeah, we've joked about in our kind of Steelers Depot chat for years that a primary thing on the free agent scouting report is whether or not these players have podcasts. And we're only kind of joking because it can cause some issues and has around the NFL in various scenarios. So, yeah, I mean, this is kind of just Roethlisberger. I mean, obviously, Porter Sr. had stuff he wanted to say about Ben, and I'm not saying his opinion was shaped by anything Ben said on the podcast, because it wasn't. It was shaped by other things. So, but I think Ben is kind of catching strays here for James Harrison's sins, if you will, because James Harrison is the one being totally irresponsible on his podcast, saying things like Mike Tomlin shouldn't be a Hall of Famer. Well, guess what? Ben Roethlisberger said he should be a Hall of Famer. James Harrison, revealing private texts with Mike Tomlin to try and make him look bad. And it's like, okay, Roethlisberger's not doing that stuff. And so if you want to, stir up drama, do it with James Harrison, because I know Porter Sr. did to an extent also address James Harrison, but the noteworthy, newsworthy thing was the Roethlisberger drama, and yeah, I wish it wasn't happening. It'll blow over, but it might get we might get some more. I mean, is Ben gonna address this on his next podcast? Is James Harrison going to spaz out on his next podcast?
James Harrison's certainly going to spaz out.
So yeah, so It's probably going to continue, unfortunately, in the news cycle until something else comes and unseats it. Which, again, there's not much going on right now. So maybe Aaron Rodgers will sign and free us from this mess. Which is probably a good transition to our second topic. Aaron Rodgers seems like he's leaning towards coming back. There was a report over the weekend that said, gosh, what was it from the NFL Network guys? It was like increasing odds.
Highly likely.
Yeah, odds increasing, increasingly likely, something like that, that he is trending towards a return, but they don't know when it's going to happen. And Terry Bradshaw went on a podcast appearance and said, he heard from somebody in the organization that Aaron Rodgers was planning on coming back. And so it's kind of felt like that for a little bit anyways. He's been in contact with Mike McCarthy several times. He has several of his buddies now on the coaching staff. James Campen is dates back with several of these guys from McCarthy's Green Bay tenure. And so it seems like that's going to happen. But what I wanted to talk about today is if Rodgers doesn't come back, we already know the Steelers aren't going to just tank. And yes, they might like Will Howard, but do they like him enough to completely bet everything on him and not even have a veteran option? I would say no. That is a definite no in my mind. They'd bring somebody in, whether that's a top level guy to be the starter or like a Brissett type of guy to maybe be a veteran backup. So I wanted to walk through a list of options today, and let's just kind of take a temperature check and maybe tell our listeners who we would prefer to have at this moment in time among this list of options. The options being Kyler Murray, Tua Tagovailoa, both of those guys, and Derek Carr. All three of those guys would need to be traded for because they are under contract with their current teams. They might end up getting cut. Not Derek Carr because he's retired, but the other two might end up getting cut, at which point they would become very attractive options potentially for very cheap. We'll talk about that. There's Malik Willis, the 150 pass wonder for the Green Bay Packers, somebody Steelers fans are very familiar with from the 2022 draft. A lot of people wanted him to be the Steelers' first round pick. Probably a good thing he wasn't because he wasn't ready for that type of thing, but he's progressed nicely and filled in nicely in Green Bay. Joe Flacco, could he complete the quadfecta, if you will, and make it to every AFC North team? That is a potential, and he's talked about that a little bit this offseason. Joe, among those veteran options, and maybe I missed some if you want to throw others out there, but which one is the most intriguing to you?
Yeah, the only other one maybe to consider could be Jacoby Brissett, but I don't really know how realistic him get. He has an attractive contract to trade, but he might stay in Arizona who knows what's going to happen there. But the most attractive one to me there, I mean, it's got to be Malik Willis. I know he doesn't have the experience, but he's going to be on the open market, so you don't have to, you don't have to trade anything for him. And I'd gamble on a guy who was a raw prospect coming in. Now was with an offensive mind in Matt LaFleur and Green Bay these last few years. I mean, obviously, very limited sample size. I think 3 starts over the last 2 years, but um, I would take the flyer with give him a Justin Fields type of contract. Because then that also doesn't preclude you from drafting a quarterback next year if he struggles this year. I think that would be the way to go, just based off the fact that you'd have to trade for one of these other guys. Other than that, I mean, I don't hate Joe Flacco as an option, just as a 1 year stopgap, similar to what Rodgers would be. So, I mean, that's kind of the same vein for me. You wouldn't really have much of a multi-year commitment. I mean, I would put Murray and Tagovailoa ahead of him if they get cut and you can sign them, on a cheap deal that you can get out of after 1 year. But other than that, I would go with Flacco as my next option, just because I don't really feel like trading assets for any of the other three is going to be worth it. And I just I don't think that they're gonna move the needle much. And if you're a Flacco, you're in the same kind of boat you're in now, and that's kind of what the Steelers seem content to be. Willis, I think, gives you at least a little bit of an upside. Um, I mean, I think there's a little bit of upside with Kyler Murray. I'm not totally sold on Tua, but again, if they're free agents and you're working with them as bridge quarterbacks for a little bit, then fine by me. But yeah, I mean, Willis is my top option there, and I think Derek Carr, like, he's retired, he's removed from major surgery. I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, and there's a history of needing to trade for those kind of guys who come out of retirement and still have rights with teams. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there's a couple
I
guys who
think
have.
Gronk might have been one.
Yeah, there's guys who have fetched, third, fourth, fifth round kind of return. I mean, here's the deal: Derek Carr's base salary in 2026 is $50 million, so he would need to tear up that contract and sign a new one. The Steelers are not going to give up draft capital and then also pay him that kind of money. That's absurd. It's not happening. But if money wasn't an object or trade value wasn't an object of those guys, is your top option still Malik Willis?
Um, I might put Kyler up there just because we've seen what he can do at times when he's fully healthy. He's had, a couple of good seasons, and you get him with Mike McCarthy, maybe it works, but he's not really the type of quarterback McCarthy's kind of
Yeah.
had success with either. So it's like I don't really know how much of a fit that would be. I don't think Tua's really had enough sustained individual success to be like a super intriguing option to me. I think Willis has the most upside out of that group right now. That he might it might be 1 and 1A with him and Kyler if there's a chance there. But I think Willis, he even like yeah yes he's a running quarterback, but he was incredibly accurate in. At each of his last two starts, dating back to I think, or not last two. There's two appearances this year. He was like 18 to 21 and like 21 to 24, something like that. But he was super accurate. He showed he can, make the throws he needs to from the pocket. So if you can do that, that works with McCarthy, and he can harness his legs like a little bit of a. I mean, he's not as good as Dak Prescott, but in the same mold as Dak Prescott as a quarterback that can be a pocket passer, and then obviously is super mobile and able to escape and use his legs. And I think Willis is even to like a better degree than Prescott. So I do think like he is a solid option on a Justin Fields sort of deal. I'm super intrigued by that possibility, even though it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, it's tough. 150 pass attempts is low, no matter
Yeah,
which way you cut it. And there is something intriguing about him, but I don't know if I could get behind. Like at that point, I'd rather just see Will Howard. To be honest, it's like just let that
that's
thing
fair.
fly. So if you're gonna actually make a move, I mean, gosh, I would agree. Kyler Murray probably is the best if money isn't an issue and trade value isn't an issue. Uh, but there's just some stuff about him that I don't know. Like there's the whole like how much is his head in it thing, and the Steelers don't need another to go from Aaron Rodgers, who was like such a positive locker room thing, to Kyler Murray, who I listen, I don't know that much about him, and before Aaron Rodgers came to town, there was a lot of negativity around him potentially coming, and that turned out not to be true. So I don't want to totally throw anything out there, but there is some worries there in my mind, I guess, for Murray. I don't know. Maybe Joe Flacco might honestly be my front runner of that group, just because I think he can operate Mike McCarthy's kind of timing, quick pass offense just fine. We've seen that. It would be more of the same, and it would be probably a notch down from what we saw this past year. But at least he could be a good mentor to Howard and whatever. It makes more sense as a stopgap. I don't see the other guys as really stopgap solutions. The other option would be, of course, to either just roll with Will Howard and Mason Rudolph, which, again, I don't think that's probably in the cards. If Rodgers doesn't come, they're going to do something, whether that's a veteran or the draft. In the draft, if we added those into this equation, Ty Simpson, Trinidad Chambliss, or Garrett Nussmeier kind of being the top three options, I guess you could throw Drew Alar into there if you're. It seems to be a popular pick in among Steelers fans on Twitter, at least I've seen. A lot of them think Alar is a good value because of the injury and everything. and he has the tools. That's, no arguing that. But would that change your calculus? If
Um, a little bit. I mean, I'm intrigued by some of these by some of the mid-round quarterbacks. I don't love Aller just because I've never seen him really put it together. But like Garrett Nussmeier is intriguing. I mean, he was you'd have him as a standout at the Senior Bowl. Like he's kind of the guy right now of that mid-round quarterback tier that I'm like, all right, like maybe he can be something, especially knowing that he had the injury last year. But yeah, I mean, if you go and you take a mid-round quarterback, then I think it's Flacco or you roll the dice with Mason Rudolph if Rodgers isn't coming back, and you just see what you can do if you have two quarterbacks developing behind him. Will Howard's your QB2. He's probably going to get a look at some point then during the year. Um, so yeah, I mean, don't necessarily think if Rodgers doesn't return that they're gonna, be a major player for any of these quarterbacks because they might just be content to develop Will Howard. That's kind of what the buzz has been. But I would like Flacco in that sense because I mean we know that Flacco is a good leader and a good mentor. So I'd rather have him than, taking a shot elsewhere.
Yeah, I think Jeremy Fowler this morning on one of the ESPN shows said that the Steelers are doing or have done a lot of work on the quarterback class. And so I think as much as we've kind of been saying for months that this quarterback class is weaker than expected, that is true, but I don't think we can discount the potential of the Steelers adding a guy. I mean, shoot, even as early as the first round, as much as I am personally against that right now. I think a Ty Simpson, if they like him, that could very well be the pick. Trinidad Chambliss, we don't even know much about that situation yet. That has no finality yet, does it?
I think the general consensus is that he is probably going to stay in college. I know Dane Brugler yesterday said that he's probably going to be back at Ole Miss next year, and I know there's hearings going on as of this morning
Ah,
in that
okay.
case.
Interesting. Well, all right. Well, let's move to the mock draft that I published last Sunday, and I just want to talk about a few quick things. We're not going to go pick for pick, but at the very top of the draft, I had a trade up, and the trade idea was to trade up 10 spots for a shot to draft Ohio State safety Caleb Downs at number 11. Joe, your initial reaction to that, would you be totally against that? Is that unrealistic? I'm going to say my part, but I just want to hear your reaction first.
I think it would make a ton of sense if Caleb Downs falls out of the top 10. I mean, I think it was either Daniel Jeremiah or Albert Breer, or I think it was Daniel Jeremiah said he was talking to scouts, where they have Caleb Downs, ranked all time compared to safety prospects, and some of them say he's the best ever. If you can
Huh.
get a safety that with his level of talent at 11th overall, and you're the cost of two-thirds in a draft where you have 12 picks, I think you do that in a heartbeat. And even if you still have Jalen Ramsey and you still have Deshaun Elliott, you can make Caleb Downs work. I mean, you look at what Nick Emmanwori did to help change the Seattle defense this year. I mean, he was a second round pick. Caleb Downs can play a variety of roles. And he would be an absolute stud, and I would do that in a heartbeat. I know people are negative on trading up for a non-quarterback, but I wouldn't trade up for Ty Simpson, and Fernando Mendoza is going first overall. So if you can trade up for what might be the best and most talented player in the draft, then absolutely you do it. And I think the price to pay there is well worth it.
Yeah, people think that the Steelers they're not going to trade up because there aren't any quarterbacks to do so, and they have a lot of other needs, and that's fair. However, it's important to know that Steelers haven't made 12 picks in a draft since 1992, when there were 12 rounds of the draft. It's very difficult to even fit 7 rookies on the roster, let alone 12. So if you draft 12, there's a good chance 3 or 4 of them might not even make the roster. And so why not trade up a little bit? And so to me, it's like, well, the Steelers never have a chance to get blue chip talents. Mike Tomlin's talked about that several times. He's even joked with, I think, prospects before at pro days, like, hey, we're never gonna have a chance to get you. We don't lose enough to get you, kind of thing. I think he told Jalen Ramsey that way back when. I remember that being one of the sound bites when Ramsey signed was traded to the Steelers. So if you can trade up and get a guy like Downs, who's like a generational prospect, I mean, shoot, you got to strongly consider that. And so that was my thinking. Now, is he going to be there at 11? A lot of people would say no, and I get that if he truly is viewed that well. And, there aren't enough quarterbacks to push other things down like there might be in some other years. But consider this. Dating back to 2018, there have been 9 first-round safeties, and the highest of them, Minkah Fitzpatrick, in 2018 at number 11. And so that's kind of why I based it on that. Now, is he a better prospect than Fitzpatrick? It sounds like scouts think yes, but some of the other names of those that I just listed, Derwin James was a pretty good prospect. Kyle Hamilton was a pretty good prospect, and those guys went 14 and 17. So safeties get pushed down. The positional value just isn't there. And so is there a chance that some of these receivers and edge rushers and the premium defensive linemen, top quarterback, maybe a Jeremiah Love, force somebody like Downs to 11? I think that's not completely out of the realm of possibility. And so that's kind of where my thinking was at. Is trading 2 third-round picks too much? Some people had that pushback for me. What's your thought? I mean, would you do something like that?
And I think that's where you're going to have to give up to move up 10 spots there. I think that's, pretty appropriately fair trade value. Steelers also just finalized their coaching staff and hired Robert Kugler, the former assistant offensive line coach of the Patriots, as their tight ends coach, and Tim Burbick as a game management and quarterbacks coach, or the quarterback. I don't know how that
interesting
is worded, but game management / quarterbacks. But Tom Arthur's obviously still the quarterbacks coach. 21 total coaches on the staff.
Right before we hopped on the podcast, the Ravens put out a similar, here's our finalized coaching staff.
I saw that.
What are the Steelers? The Steelers are like, dang it, they beat us to the punch. But okay, interesting. We'll have more to talk about next week, clearly, with some of that stuff. But I don't have enough info now to really vamp on that.
No.
So
definitely not.
Back to the mock, just a couple more things. I had 3 wide receivers in my mock draft, and some might say that's overkill. Are 3 really going to make it? But you got to consider, we don't know what Roman Wilson is. Adam Thielen, I guess he said that he could come back if Rodgers comes back, but you pretty much count him out. He's retired. Marcus Valdes-Scantling probably gone. Scotty Miller probably gone. Calvin Austin III. I guess that could go either way, but you have to kind of assume
he's probably gone.
He was talking on that, what was that podcast he was on? It was some
Memphis radio show.
And it sounded like he's kind of preparing to leave. He said he loves Pittsburgh, but it read like a guy who was preparing to leave. With that, you have what? You have DK Metcalf, Roman Wilson. Is that it?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, you got to fill out that room somehow. And
I guess you got the practice squad guys. You got Max Hurleman in there.
Yeah.
But you got Skoranek.
Oh yeah, there you go. Dirtbag.
Yeah, he's your wide receiver 3.
As long as he doesn't follow Danny Smith to Tampa or something. Is he under contract? I think he is under contract.
I think he's under contract.
Okay, well, that's good. Anyway, my point being, and this is not an Arthur Smith offense where they're going to carry 4 or 5 receivers. They're going to probably carry 5, 6, maybe more receivers on this initial 53 because McCarthy likes to use those 3 and 4 wide receiver sets sometimes. And so they need to fill out this room, and that was my thinking. I didn't really go into it wanting 3 necessarily, but I wanted to get one after I drafted something else in the first round. I needed to get one in the second round. That was pretty much a lock in my mind, and I landed on Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana. Our Alex Kozora did a great scouting report on him, which is already up on the site. Seems to be just an all-around kind of good player. He's got the burst. He can create yards after. He's reliable hands. He can get open. So one of those guys who can do it all, and the Steelers have kind of lacked that kind of guy for, it's felt like years. I mean, even when Pickens was there, he didn't have necessarily a full, well-rounded skill set. I wouldn't say DK Metcalf has a well-rounded skill set. They're kind of lacking in certain areas. So a guy like Omar Cooper Jr. makes a lot of sense. Then I took a kind of a smaller school prospect in Ted Hurst. I've talked about him last week. He was a standout at the Senior Bowl. 6'2", he's got the speed. He can make crazy catches downfield. So that's I've had him right after Omar Cooper, so in the 3rd round. And then going all the way down to the 6th round, I took Barrion Brown out of LSU. The thought process there is, okay, he's a smaller guy. He's shifty. He can get open. He's fast. I think he was the fastest receiver in Mobile on their Zebra Technologies tracking thing they did. But he also had 6 return touchdowns in college. And so this is a guy who, I don't think it's punt return that he has experience at, but I think this is a guy you can mold into kind of being that punt returner with Calvin Austin gone. Maybe he can get involved in the kick return game too. And so that was my thinking there. 3 receivers. Do you like the idea, Joe?
I do like the idea, especially because Brown fills that need. You're going to need a returner especially if Calvin Austin leaves, Scotty Miller. So you need a return man. That works. I mean, I think it's not out of the realm of possibility they take 3 receivers because really, I mean, it depends on what they do in free agency, right? But
Yeah.
if they don't sign, a top flight, everybody loves linking them to Alec Pierce. If they don't sign, a guy that can function as a true number 2 receiver, then why not take as many swings of the position as possible in the draft and find guys that, like Brown that can fill multiple roles, find a guy that can do more. So if you're gonna, not sign one of the top free agent receivers and you're just kind of dip your toes into the water, then why not draft through with I think given where their needs are right now, I think that's a smart thing to do.
My biggest personal issue, and I heard about it in the comments, I saw everybody's comments, was critical of me, and I agree. I didn't draft a cornerback until round 5, and that is not ideal, we'll say. The Steelers don't really have corners under contract other than Joey Porter Jr. There's Dante Kent, but he tore his ACL. There's some other practice squad guys.
Eccles has got another year.
Brandon Eccles is still around. He's more of a slot, but can play either. So you need that outside guy. James Pierre, free agent, might fetch decent money, honestly. So we'll see what happens there. Asante Samuel Jr., we'll see what happens there. Maybe they try and retain him, but either way, they probably do need to add talent. My line of thinking, and I put this in the post, is that they would go and sign a bigger name corner to pair with Joey Porter. So that was my line of thinking, but I understand people who were upset with my decision. I also had a punter in the 7th round. Corliss Waitman hasn't been doing it for me, so just wanted to lock in a punter who is consistent and could provide that long-term stability. Joe, any other? I think we'll move on to our listener question. We're getting a little long on time here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm kind of of the belief the Steelers are going to re-sign both Pierre and Asante Samuel Jr. And I also wouldn't be surprised that if they went and signed another cornerback in free agency. So I wonder if we're kind of overplaying their cornerback need right now. So I didn't mind a 5th round cornerback.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for backing me. There's going to be some people angry at you now as well. We're going to go to the voicemail. This one from our good friend Brett.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett from San Angelo, and I have a recycled question in that Dave on the last couple of podcasts, asked some questions to the audience. I would be curious to hear your thoughts on the questions. The first one was, do you think that Ramsey is worth $19 million? And if so, what would your plan for him be next year? To me, he's not. And I probably would try to move on, especially if I can find a young safety in the draft.
All right, we're going to stop it there. He is reading off some questions that our Dave Bryan asked on the Terrible Podcast to his audience. And so maybe we'll do one of these each episode since there's a bunch of questions lumped in here. His first one being about Jalen Ramsey. Is he worth keeping around at safety at his price tag? And I think our Dave Bryan put up an excellent in-depth post. He talked to a former agent about this and the money situation and when some roster bonus stuff is due. about Ramsey, and so definitely check that out if you guys haven't already. But Joe, just with that higher price tag, what do you think on Ramsey? Is he worth it at just safety?
I mean, is he overpaid? I think yeah, but is it worth getting rid of him? Because I don't think you're going to be able to trade him for much of anything. Is it worth just cutting him and then you're creating a new hole at safety, you're creating a new hole and potentially finding somebody else who can man the slot behind Brennan Eccles if even he's the starting slot cornerback? Um, I just don't know if like for a year it's necessarily completely worth moving on. I don't know if you want to open up new holes because I don't know how much they really need that money either. I mean, they have cap space. They can find ways to create cap space. Um, I'm just not sure that moving on from Ramsey and just opening up new needs is something that this team should be looking to do.
Yeah, I agree. And he has some positional versatility. You can justify the high price tag by saying, all right, well, at least he can fill in at really anywhere in the secondary if disaster strikes. And so that's how you probably try to justify it. Unless they can trade him, that's the one kind of wild card here, is if he has some trade value and the Steelers can start to either stockpile stuff for next year's draft, or maybe that's part of moving up for a premium talent like a Downs. And the second part of your question, Brett, I think we already addressed that earlier. I'm in favor of them making a move for somebody like a Caleb Downs. And so that would certainly then make Jalen Ramsey less necessary because Deshaun Elliott's still around. Of course, they'd probably still need to then sign a veteran to pair with those guys because the room we've seen over the years, the last few years, safety depth is very important. So anyhow, thank you for the question. Brett will answer some of the rest of those that you tacked on there on future episodes. I'm Ross, that's Joe, and we will catch you guys next time.